Should be just about there.
We'll go with it.
Yep.
Thank you for coming to our Revolution Washington Brinikrats vetting interview of Christopher Roberts for State Representative, Position 2 in the 32nd LD. Thank you for joining us, Robert. I'm sorry, Christopher. I go with the words, the big words. So thanks for joining us. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your legislative district?
Sure. My name is Chris Roberts. I'm happy to be here. For the last 14 years, I've lived in Shoreline. I'm currently on the Shoreline City Council and have served as mayor for 2 years, where to the best of my knowledge, I was the first Native American mayor to serve as a mayor in King County. I'm an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation, which is originally from Mississippi, but the Choctaw Nation now is primarily in Oklahoma. My wife and I have one son. He's 7 years old, attending a public school here in the district. He is, I'm part of his work as with this PTA as the legislative representative for this PTA, and have gone down to Olympia to advocate for our children's education. I'm also proud to say that I'm his soccer coach. And it's really, largely because of our children that we need people to be good advocates in the legislature. Because if we don't protect our planet, if we don't fund our schools, it's going to be them who suffer. And so I'm running to be their voice to make sure that we have a bright and bold future for everyone.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I thank you on behalf of my 9.5-year-old. I really appreciate that. Well, thank you for joining us, and I'd like to hand it off to Rhonda to start off the questions.
Hi, thank you again for joining with us today. So one of the main points I always try to get out first, because I think it's like the roots to all evil, is talk about anti-corruption. So I'm with the Represent Us. It's a national organization that works on passing the American Anti-Corruption Act. In our questionnaire, there's an ask if you signed on to it. It looks like you did. So thank you for that. Which parts of it do you like the best that got you to go ahead and sign on?
It's been my brain. I apologize. My brain is a little bit mush after months of doorbelling. But I think broadly, there is a problem with the amount of lobbyists and the amount of influence that they have in both our federal government especially, but also within our state governments collectively. There is a tendency, especially at the federal level, that it's the lobbyists who write much of the legislation. It's the lobbyists who work to get specific provisions in bills that help or their companies or their organizations. And what this means broadly is that the elected officials really don't understand what's in the legislation that they pass. And it's when it comes down to legislating, when it comes down to actually getting good policy for the people of our state and our country, those details matter. And you need to have representatives who are I believe you need to have representatives who are knowledgeable about the subjects and the committees that they're on, so that they can be asked good questions and ferret out some of these provisions that are passed or inserted into legislation to understand what they mean. So if we think about broadly, if we think about the tax exemptions given to Boeing, one of the questions that a few years ago, one of the questions that should have been asked is, where are the guarantees that these jobs would materialize in Washington State? And if you don't understand the legislation well enough, if you only sort of understand sort of the broader talking point, oh, okay, this is going to do great jobs, or if this is going to fund education. If you don't understand the details, you are, as a society, we are lost. One of the things that the legislature did when they're passing the school funding bill is that they said they allocated to the districts, I believe it was $5 per student for the library. But there was no actual provision in the legislation that said that that money actually had to be spent on books. So, I mean, this is the kind of detailed work that really needs to be done between elected officials.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one thing that we're definitely fighting is who's actually writing these laws. So we're trying to encourage people and let them know that we have the power of people's initiatives and stuff like that too, and we can help with some of that, hopefully. When it comes to elections as they are, they're all like 2 to 4 years long. Lots and lots of money.
There's some 6-year positions out there.
Right. Oh, and I'm talking about campaigning. I was being funny. Like some people are campaigning for like 4 years to get a seat. What do you think about publicly financed elections to where we have a set start time, a set end time, you get this much money, go?
Well, I agree that I like the Seattle model of publicly financing of campaigns. I think there's some implementation details that need to be worked out, and some education that really needs to be work, because the thresholds, especially for the citywide positions, was relatively high, and it made it very difficult for some candidates to qualify for public funds. And then when they did qualify for couple individuals, when they did qualify for public funds, it was much too late for that to make any difference in the primary. So the way the Seattle initiative set up, there is an advantage to sort of more established candidates who have broader bases initially, and not someone who's coming and starting to campaign. I know the Seattle measure also does limit when you can start fundraising, but that also serves as an impediment to people starting out and who maybe have a great idea and a great reason to run, but don't really have that kind of established network. So while I think there's merits to the British system and some of these other countries where they have specific sort of campaign starts today and then ends on election day, those systems also have more of definitely a proportional representation system, or they have a broader sense of that the party that they represent, the candidates represent, the party is more important than the individual in many cases. So you're voting for Labor, you're voting for Tories, you're voting for, you name the party, and the individuals matter, but they're not. You're running as the party candidate, and so it's those, and the parties themselves have built up those brands and those reputations over tens of years, if not nearly hundreds of years, and so people know what Labor is representing and what their party is standing for, and it's the candidates running for prime minister in those countries who are the ones leading the campaigns, and the individuals are more or less sort of re-articulating that message. So, but in our system, when you have individuals running, and the party matters, but it's a secondary thing. You need to have longer periods of time for people to introduce themselves, especially in large constituencies.
Yeah, thank you. It is hard to hit all those doors in a certain amount of time. So are you a proponent of like a ranked choice voting, which will
Yes.
Thank you. That was a quick response. I like that. All right.
Well, right now we have a system which is not very helpful to a lot of different voices in our system. Our top two primary, first of all, is in the heat of summer. So very few people are paying attention. I mean, there's lots of people. I mean, some of my friends are just coming back from a trip to California where they went to the Redwood National Forest and all these kind of nice things that people do during the summer when school's out. Campaigning and politics is on the back of everyone's mind. But what the top two primary limits is because of where people are paying attention. I mean, even though there are articles in most papers now about the election, I mean, they're starting to ramp up in terms of, please pay attention, please pay attention. It really hurts and harms third parties and people trying to break into the system. So what you have in nearly every single case where there has been a Republican and Democrat running, or two Democrats or two Republicans, it's only those two parties that have advanced. The only time you've seen third parties advance under the top two, especially in Washington State, is when there is only a Democrat and a centrist, or a Democrat and a libertarian, or a Republican and libertarian running. So those are the only times where you see a third party is able to make it onto has currently been able to make it onto the November ballot. So third parties their voices are completely missing when people are most paying attention.
Right.
And so if we went to a ranked choice system, we can have all the candidates on a November ballot. We can have parties compete and individuals compete, and then individual voters can then decide, oh, okay, I like candidate A first, and then, well, candidate B is pretty good too, so they'll get my second choice.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I can't wait till I know that we're working on it. A lot of different organizations here in Washington are working on implementing that city by city, county by county, until we can try to get it passed through the state. So thank you for being proponent of that.
It's worked. I mean, too. I mean, outside of the Pierce County example here in Washington, I mean, it's worked really well in Oakland. It's worked really well in San Francisco. People understand the system. It's fair. It's a little bit more complicated in terms of trying to interpret the results, but people intuitively understand that, okay, if my candidate finishes third or sort of outside the running, that my vote is now going to be reallocated to my second choice or my third choice.
Right. So then that way everybody actually does get a vote into, yeah, it's nice. So how is your campaign being financed? What kind of money are you accepting?
I've been getting money from individual donors, mostly people within the district. I've been getting money from tribes and labor unions.
Wonderful. And then, so now with this stuff, so thank you for all the anti-corruption stuff that you believe in. So the next thing I like to do is just kind of bring it to ask you, what kind of made you run for this position? I understand you already are at an elected position, so if you want to just talk about that, but what made you want to run for state rep?
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned, I have a 7-year-old. This year, he came home from school a couple times, and overnight, he's had nightmares about a stranger with a gun coming to his school.
Oh.
And he's 7. This is not the type of society that we need to live in. And then when we think about sort of protecting our environment, there's a lot that we need to do. I read an article the other day that suggested that the cost of renewable solar especially is going to be as cost competitive as building a new clean natural gas plant in the next couple of years. And I mean, this is much faster than I think anyone really was anticipating. And so we have this opportunity to really look at our building codes and look at what policies we have in terms of, can we move away from natural gas? Should we consider saying to new, especially in the next couple of years, can we say, hey, we'll have no more new natural gas hookups for buildings? And think of what that's going to do. Think about all the carbon emissions that is going to go down. the state has also eliminated or reduced many of its incentives for electric vehicles. The main subsidy is decline is being decreased. The thoughts of having a road usage charge. I mean, there's some problems broadly with a road usage charge, but what it also has the effect of is disincentivizing the use of electric vehicle purchase of electric vehicles. So we have and then California passed a law recently that for all new buildings to have solar on all new roofs, and I think that's something, again, we should consider. At least we should say that all new buildings, at minimum, we should say that all new buildings should have the conduit put into the roof, so that if someone wanted to install solar, it's all right there. So you just sort of drop the solar in and you're ready to go. And so if you look at most of our carbon emissions, it's mostly, I mean, large parts are from transportation and from our housing. And so if we think about all of these things, we have great opportunities right now that we should take advantage of. And if we don't take action now, it's going to be too late. I was talking to Quinault President Fawn Sharp the other day, and she was saying the fact that her traditional village is now being forced to move off the coast because of the rising ocean. And the spot where the Quinault signed their treaty with the United States, that spot is now completely underwater.
Wow.
So there are a lot of, I mean, we cannot deny, no anymore, that the climate change is having an effect on our natural and built environment.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Those are, wow. I didn't realize all of that. So thank you. It's a really good reason to run. Our next section, I usually give it over back to Corey. Courtney. I saw Core on here. I just went to go up and anyway, Courtney. So I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away, Courtney, and she'll explain what we do next.
Thank you. First, what we'll be getting to is what we call the list, and it's a list of services and resources. And the questions are, do you think these services should be publicly funded or privatized, or have a public option? And but before we jump into that, I just want to follow up. You mentioned I am in Pierce County, so I know about our boondoggle with ranked choice voting, and I do want to say that some people who seem to be in the know, I remember it, but I wasn't on the inside of the system. They said it was poorly implemented in Pierce County, and I want to make sure that we say that as often as we can, because we do support ranked choice voting. And then you mentioned LNG, and Tacoma Pierce County is fighting a new LNG plant at the Port of Tacoma. It is on or adjacent to, because it's basically on fill land at the Port of Tacoma, in that the end of the land was tribal, and then they filled out more land and claimed the city and port filled land into the water. So now there's land that was never there, and the city port people say that that is their land. And the Puyallup tribe is unique in that it's, I think, the most urban tribe in the United States. So that means that the people live in an urban area adjacent to the port. They're under threat of explosion there. Northeast Tacoma is under threat. Downtown Tacoma is under threat. We have tsunami issues. We have, due to our earthquake risk, we have Mount Rainier, the Puyallup River, which is the mouth of the Port of Tacoma, is a regular lahar flow from Mount Rainier. There's people and natural risk to being built there. And I like that you said we don't need to be investing in any more natural gas infrastructure. Would you use, it's a Tacoma fight, but as a state person, a state representative, would you be willing to speak up against the LNG at the Port of Tacoma?
So I'm a member of the Safe Energy Leadership Alliance, and we've sent letters to the Port of Tacoma about this facility. The other things that you didn't mention is the fact that many of the environmental reviews have not looked at the emissions of the ships that are going to be idling there and burning resources and burning fossil fuels, just loading there. And so those ships have not been taken account into the environmental impact statement. So, there's a lot of different issues. And then the other issue I have with the Port of Tacoma broadly is the fact that the Northwest Detention Center is on Port of Tacoma property. And I think as a state, we need to take strong action against the port and say, no, you cannot have this private detention center on state property.
Thank you for that. That would have been my follow-up because I was just down there banging pots and pans last night as part of the noise brigade. So thank you for standing up so strongly on behalf of the people who care about the port and who are impacted by what happens at the port. Whew. Thank you. All right. We'll get into the list now. As I said, it's a private-public kind of question, and we take hybrid answers. So, and we can zoom through them. If you have something to say about it, feel free, but yes, no, private, socialized, if you want to do quick and just go through, we can do that. And then we'll have time for more discussion. We can always come back to anything in the list as well.
Okay.
So we'll start with an easy one, and it's easy because I saw your questionnaire, so I know where you stand. Healthcare.
We need a single payer system in Washington State. I believe that healthcare is a right that should be enjoyed by all Washingtonians.
Excellent. Postal Service, do you want to preserve its public nature?
We need to preserve its public nature. I also like what some countries have done in terms of expanding the services provided by the post office, including banking.
Excellent. Schools.
Completely public.
Okay. Prisons.
They also need to be public.
Distribution and investment of Social Security.
Public.
Foster care.
This is an interesting one. Broadly, the state has an interest in preserving the health and welfare of any child that's in the foster care system. And so, I think that part that always needs to be a public part. There are foster care individuals who are in private families. So, at that point, the families are the ones who have the day-to-day responsibility of a child.
Right. So if you want to maintain foster care as a publicly funded service in private homes. Does that sound?
Well, that's how, broadly the current system. And then the state needs to make sure that any child in foster care system is taken care of, up through about the age of 25. It's not, we can't just sort of cut people off at the age of 18, especially when you don't have the accumulation of wealth and the sort of benefits of that you
have with a family.
That you have with, especially, with the family.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And then childcare.
I think we need to work toward make sure that there's more services available for parents. I think that we should be encouraging businesses to have childcare on site and figure out ways to make that work. We need to set higher standards for childcare providers. So at this point, I don't think that creating a completely state-run system is feasible or workable.
Okay, and it's kind of like what I think most of us see with healthcare is, it's publicly funded, but it doesn't mean that the doctors are government employees. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we understand that there's it could be all government employees like the post office, or it could kind of be like the healthcare system where we're going to publicly fund this to private providers. So I do need to work on the best way to describe this list and maybe reorganizing them by how to think about them. But thanks for muscling through on this. The next one is utilities, electricity, trash removal, water, internet, cell service even.
I think that there we need to make sure that all people across the state have access to these utilities. I mean, we don't have in many rural areas is access to strong broadband. Um, and so as a state, we need to make sure that these utility companies provide services across the state. So I mean, to build fiber optic networks across the state so we can connect rural people who choose to live in rural areas with the global commerce of the internet, and not have to rely on broadband or really slow slow service. And this is what happened when we, as a nation, put a tax on telephones to make sure that the telephone companies were required to build service out. I think we can do the same thing I think we're getting closer with cell phone companies and wireless signals, to make sure that everyone is in every part of the state is covered.
Excellent. Thank you. Public lands and natural resources.
We need to protect and preserve those as much as possible.
Excellent. Banks.
They definitely need. We need to. We need a public bank for the Washington State to make sure that we protect and preserve our infrastructure. One of the things that the state has done when it took away funds from the Public Works Assistance account was actually raise the price for local governments and water districts and other jurisdictions to actually maintain our infrastructure. So what's happened? So by taking away that money, there's been less money that's been able to go out to local jurisdictions, and so local jurisdictions are having to go out to the private market to get bonds and other things, other sources of debt. So we're spending more. So ultimately, we as individuals, we spend more on interest payments than we have to, if we had a publicly funded and maintained bank. Also, when we think about a public bank, one of the things that a public bank could do is actually help students with student loans. And if instead of paying money to Nelnet and all these other sort of private companies and whatever interest rates they're charging, again, a public bank could be able to provide lower interest rate loans, and so really help people with relatively high or moderately high student loans.
And our interest goes back to us.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Mass transit, from buses to ferries, railways, even airways.
We need to make sure we continue to invest in our transit system. There are a lot of people in our state, up to 30% of people who do not drive, who do not have an automobile, and we need to make sure that they are able to get across our region safely and efficiently. And so we need to invest in our transit. We need to continue to invest in making sure that we build out the light rail spine in the Seattle region. We also need to make sure that we work on building those connecting bus routes so people can get generally east-west to a transit station, so they don't have to spend money on either a private automobile or other kind of private transportation.
Excellent. Thank you. Infrastructure.
We have a huge need. Within the 32nd, I calculate there's at least $1 billion in infrastructure investments that need to be made, not even counting sound transit and other sort of broad transit improvements. So, this is the scope this is one district of 49. And so if you start adding all of this up, it's huge. We have a lot of work to do for not only just sort of maintaining sort of what we can see, our roads and our parks, but also many of the infrastructure we have is underground. Our stormwater systems, our sewer infrastructure, our water infrastructure, all of these things need to be maintained. And we as a state and as a country have really failed to make sure that there's adequate maintenance to maintain our infrastructure.
Excellent, thank you. And then the military and its associated industrial complex. Are you keen on privatized military actions?
No.
So you still like to have a public military?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good on you. Thank you. You want to keep the Veterans Administration public, or would you like to privatize that?
We need to, we need to keep the VA public. We need to make sure there's within both the state Department of Veterans Affairs and the federal department, we need to make sure we beef up those services.
Excellent. Thank you. And then do you support public scientific funding?
Yes.
Excellent. Space exploration as in NASA, not Space Force. We've had to amend that question.
Yes. NASA has done wonderful things for our quality of life.
Excellent. Thank you. Libraries.
Completely. I can't even believe this is even an issue. I saw that stuff about Amazon and trying to get the libraries out. I'm like, what are you thinking about? Libraries perform a very valuable and important public service. They are, I mean, it's computers for people who need computers and to check emails, to search for jobs. I mean, it's a resource for people to find out about the world. It's also a place where we can explore our mind. I mean, explore everything. It's to read and to explore new universes. I mean, that's what libraries provide, and it's free.
I love it. Thank you. I love your passion. And then the next one is community housing. Do you support public housing for the least among us, or for people who might be aging out of or
Yes.
through disability?
We need more affordable housing for people of all income levels. In an ideal scenario, you build housing so that you have a variety of people from all walks of life in different income levels in one building. That's the ideal. I mean, you don't want to sort of separate people who are just sort of barely making by and living in one building or one area of a city, but you need to have an integrated facilities.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Elections. Do you support, we kind of touched on this already, publicly funded elections?
Yes.
Excellent. Right. Currently, a vast majority of our the people who go to court, not just criminal, but say divorce or violation of contracts, they can't afford legal services. Would you be interested in expanding the availability of public legal services?
I'm not sure I'm quite, I think I like the idea and I like the direction. I'm not sure how much, what the public should fund and what the individuals involved in a dispute should fund. It's a very interesting question. And so I want to reserve a little bit of judgment here. There are many issues with our justice system. Including the fact that we have, the idea of monetary bail is a huge problem. The fact that we have policing which disproportionately affects people of color and people from marginalized communities. Those are issues that I'm more passionate about and want to move forward on. I think there are certainly lots of other lots of challenges with our legal system broadly. There is when we think about even signing up for Zoom's terms of service, we have agreed to arbitration. And as individuals, we don't have the ability to choose what arbitrator to use. And so it's Zoom is able to decide for itself who its arbitrators are. And well, Zoom can choose for me to choose from four of its friends who always um, rule in favor of Zoom in any kind of dispute we have. I mean, every time we use a credit card, basically almost everything we do is now bound up in some arbitration agreement that we've signed away. Um, so these are the problems that I see that need to be addressed. Certainly, there are problems with individuals getting resources for misdemeanors, people going to small claims court. The deck is definitely um, stacked away from people who have less resources. Um, but I think that if we look just right now at how much we've currently underfunded our public defender's office, where the Supreme Court had to step in and say, oh, you can only have a maximum of like somewhere around 400 cases a year. I mean, that's still a lot of cases. You're still not giving a lot of time to each individual person that they're serving. And so we have to really think about how do we adequately fund the existing programs we have before sort of saying to everyone, hey, you have a right, we as a state are going to help defend everyone.
I understand. And I appreciate your willingness to consider the question and understand the nuances behind it as well. The next one on the list is first responders. Do you want to maintain public first responders?
Yes.
Excellent. And then we like to end with an idea that is on our questionnaire. So I did peek, and I'm comfortable with your answer on paper. So now I just want to hear you give a little feedback on this. It's called the caregiver's basic income. It is just an idea at this point. The idea has not been, there's no policy written behind it, so nobody's suggesting how it's paid for. But the idea is if you're raising a child, say under the age of 8, and that was picked because in Washington at 8, children have to go to either school or be registered as homeschooled. Mm-hmm. And, or if you're caring for someone who is elderly or disabled, that you shouldn't have to juggle also a job or jobs while doing that. And often people are doing 2 or more of those things, raising children and aging parents, caring for aging parents. So, but the idea is that we give them a basic income, and it goes to it credits their Social Security, because at this time, if someone takes off time from work to care for someone, they don't accrue any Social Security benefits. Mm-hmm. So as an idea that's not been fleshed out, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that's a good first step. I'm encouraged to see that some countries are working and thinking about and getting closer to a universal basic income. I mean, I think I saw something in The Guardian earlier today about some of these discussions about what a universal basic income will look like, how much that should be, but definitely sort of as an interim step. I mean, there are lots of problems that occur when someone leaves the workforce to care for a child or for a parent or another adult, and there is certainly lots of penalties attached, not penalties in terms of fines or anything like that, but there are definitely lots of costs associated with leaving the workforce for its effects. I mean, and that disproportionately affects women who have to may be passing up promotions, they may be passing up opportunities for advancement in their career to care for a child. And so I think, and you said it yourself, I mean, caring for a child is a full-time job, especially in those early years. I mean, you don't get much rest. I mean, it's possible to work, but I mean, it's not really possible to. It's harder to think when you have taking care for a child, and it's harder to sort of find the time and energy to apply for new jobs or get new skills when you are raising a child. And so we have advanced quite a bit. I mean, there are more online classes, so people can take classes and do work on their own schedule. in between nap times or things like that. But it is hard when you are focused on one thing, which is raising a child, and often it may be multiple children. That it is hard to sort of think about other things and sort of thinking about advancement in your own sort of professional career, and think the idea of in social security and what's going to be paid out is not your concern when you're dealing with an infant who is throwing up and not sleeping. And
Yes. Thank you for understanding. From one parent to another, thank you. So that is the end of our list. There was something. So I'm going to just keep you for a second. Your district is geographically compact, I'd say.
comparatively.
Yeah. And I don't know how much rural space you have, but your environmentalism, I feel like, might lend itself to discuss this. Modern agriculture, food production, animal and plant, have some destructive side effects. Do you have some opinions on that you'll take to the state legislature, despite not being a very rural community?
Well, I think there's, several things we need to do. One is we need to promote what we can within urban areas, urban gardening. I think that's one thing that can be done. We also have, I did read an article, or I saw a report the other day that there's lots of innovation around sustainable agriculture, and it's possible now to, and I've seen some things that where you can grow good yields within a warehouse and things like that. So that don't need as much water, don't need as many pesticides, if any. So I think we're at a, I think within the next 20 years, I think we're going to see a new revolution in agriculture within the United States.
Excellent. I hope so. And I do like to mention permaculture and holistic land management as something for people who will have the voice to look into, because those are also impact reducing.
Mm-hmm. And I've definitely seen more and more people who have dug up their lawns and installed either entirely raised beds or other kinds of sort of natural features within their yard. And so I think I'm seeing more and more of that as people are sort of understanding that, well, I don't want to mow my lawn. That's or right. This space, it has good light. It can actually produce vegetables over the summer, so I can grow my own organic vegetables. I pulled out a couple zucchini from my garden. Yeah, I got one that was a little bit bigger than I wanted to. But
yeah, don't we all?
Yeah. Yeah. I did get it before it became baseball bat size. So that
okay. It might still be good for zucchini bread. Yeah. I like to facetiously say, if I can't smoke it or eat it, I don't want to grow it. So I have a 1/4 acre, 14 fruit trees. I'm right in there with you. Thanks, buddy. So at this point, I will open the door to anybody else who has any questions. Rhonda, Brian?
Hi, Christopher. Great interview so far. I got to say, I love your stance on environmental issues, and I'm actually in the process of planning to tear up my yard to put in planter boxes. So I really appreciate that. I wanted to ask, so you're in kind of in between Snohomish and King County. I used to live in Snohomish County, and one of the big issues up there is the oil trains coming through from Canada and from the tar sands. Can you address that? And is there anything that you would be able to do to help in that fight?
Yeah, so on the council, we passed a resolution opposing the transportation of oil by train. So I'm already there.
Awesome. That's great.
When elected, I would plan to work with other legislators to try to, I think transportation, especially transportation of oil and coal by train, is probably the worst mode of transportation for those.
I would add also LNG to that, since there's massive amounts of methane emissions during the transportation process.
No, I mean, we have to. All of those things can cause huge health problems, do cause huge health problems, and can cause huge explosions and problems. Many places in Washington State, the rail line bisects the town, and if you have mile-long coal trains, it can be a long time before an emergency vehicle can get from one side of the tracks to the other. And I mean, it's a big problem. It's not so much of a problem within the 32nd. It's not a problem within the 32nd, as there are no places that are on the other side of the tracks in the 32nd. But even just in Edmonds, the ferry terminal is on the other side of the railroad tracks, and there's no bridge. There's no way for an emergency vehicle to cross when there's a mile-long train, and if the train is stopped for some reason, and blocking those access points. I mean, if someone is injured or there's a fire over there, I mean, it could be a long time before help arrives.
I lived adjacent to Marysville, just slightly north of you and a little bit northeast of Everett. And when the trains go through, they literally cut the city in half. And if they have to stop, like, traffic just comes to a standstill, you know? So yeah, I totally can relate to what you're saying there. One thing else I wanted to ask is what your protections on water and how you would be able to use that in your platform, because water, as you know, is going to be one of our most treasured resources with the effects of global climate change. What are some protections that you can put in place for us?
Well, we need to continue to make sure we enhance and restore our streams and rivers and waterways. So that's the first part. The second thing is we need to be very careful about where we build. We need to be careful about how stormwater is managed. One of the things that's happening within the district is that the Edmonds School District is trying to build a retention pond for its stormwater right next to some of the wells for the Olympic View Water District. And so there are the district is saying that, hey, we can build this facility right next to these wells and there's not going to be any leaching. There's not going to be any issues there. And we all kind of are scratching our heads and like, yeah, we agree with the Olympic View Water District. That's not an appropriate place to build a retention pond. Even so, I think we'll see where it ends up. But I mean, we need to make sure that people need to think about how and where we protect our sources of water. We need to make sure that we work quickly to eliminate any of the combined sewer overflow pipes. They're mostly still in Seattle, and many of them are still in Seattle, so we don't accidentally have discharge of sewer going into the Puget Sound. We need to work on eliminating shoreline. There's 2 dams in shoreline. We need to work sure we can get those dams and remove those dams, and the state needs to help. I believe the state needs to help take those dams out. We need to work faster on replacing all our culverts so that more of our streams are available for salmon to run and spawn. There's a lot we need to do.
You seem to be quite the guy to get it done, though. I appreciate your stances, and I look forward to hopefully being able to support you in your fight for all of this. So thank you very much.
Oz, do you have anything? Nope. All right, let's talk about taxes.
Wait. I wanted to take this opportunity, sorry, Rhonda, to mention Karen Hardy is running in the 7th, which is the northeast corner of Washington, and they are fighting a silica smelter because it's being placed on top of an aquifer recharge area. Again, inappropriately placed. So I just wanted to let you know that you have an ally coming.
I hope so.
Okay, Rhonda.
Well, we're gonna try. We're gonna get her in there. Okay, so taxes, yay! Everybody's favorite thing to talk about, right? So Washington State has the most regressive tax system in our nation. Tell me what you have in store or some thoughts on how to make it a much more progressive system here in Washington.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think you said it. Our tax system in our state is unsustainable. For many people, it's broken. We have it, when we try to fund anything from our police to our fixing our roads or building sidewalks or replacing culverts, our only choices to fund these services are property taxes, regressive sales taxes. We can also then talk about fees that all hurt the people who can least afford it the most. And so what I think that needs to happen is I believe that we need an income tax. And I think that recognizing the politics of the state and recognizing how people feel, just adding an income tax is not enough. What we need to do is we need to make sure that I think we need to eliminate or reduce the sales tax at the same time. And I think that's the only way that I believe that people in the state are going to actually support an income tax. Because I mean, I think they'll see, perhaps justifiably, that if you add a tax, then suddenly that it's just going to be more and more people are going to fall into that tax. So there has to be some bargain. And I think the sales of the taxes that we have, the sales tax is probably the most regressive of all our taxes, because if you're a parent or if you're an adult, lots of the basic necessities of life are taxed. And also broadly, the amount of money that we spend on, as a state, we spend on products subject to the sales tax is less and less each year, as more and more of our disposable income is going to services rather than taxable goods. So I think, and so all of our taxable goods are things that people need on their daily lives, from toilet paper to Kleenex to aspirin to diapers. I mean, all those things are taxable. So that's where I think what the bargain we need to make with voters is to make our tax system more regressive, to make our tax system more fair for everyone. We need to have the income tax, and we need to eliminate or reduce the sales tax.
How about looking? I'm
interested, though. I mean, I think Senator Chase has that interesting proposal of expanding the idea of intangibles as part of the property tax system. And that's I'm still working with her, trying to understand more about what that would do. I think that would help, but again, it doesn't necessarily solve the rest of nature and the broad problem of the sales tax that we have in the state.
Right. Oh, Courtney wants to jump in.
Oh, I do. I heard you say that the basic necessities are taxed so often. And in our caregivers basic income discussion, you did note appropriately that this would have a huge impact on women. So there's something called the pink tax where menstrual products are taxed. Do you find that to be an appropriate tax? And would you?
I think that anything that is, I think we need to figure out a way to define not just, the pink tax, but anything involving, we need to really have a serious discussion about whether diapers should be taxed, whether over-the-counter medications should be taxed. Things like toilet paper, Kleenex, those things. And these are things that we use in our daily lives. Everyone needs them. Everyone uses these products. And the way, especially with over-the-counter medication, there are many insurance plans that say, push generics, and there is a desire and recognition that if a drug goes over the counter, it is cheaper than a prescription medication. But because of the way of our tax system, they are suddenly not necessarily covered by insurance, so you're paying for it out of pocket, those medications out of pocket, but also you're now paying sales tax on it. And so that is a big problem that we need to solve. So it's not, yes, the pink tax is a problem, but I mean, the problem is much broader than just menstrual products and other products that women need also in their basic day-to-day lives,
Excellent.
or that
Thank you.
many women need in their day-to-day lives.
That was a bigger, better answer than I had hoped for. So thank you.
Yeah, it was great. What about like looking at some capital gains or restructuring the B&O?
Well, we definitely need to. I mean, the B&O tax is a problem. It is for businesses. It is unfair that a business that sells a lot of products and goods is taxed at the same, who receives the same revenue as another business who is lots of profits, are taxed at the same rate. I mean, that is a problem. I usually do not use Texas as an example for anything. I mean, Texas is good for a couple things. One, for their use of the investment in wind and especially wind energy. But Texas, in terms of a B&O tax, Texas also has a very good system where the cost of goods are exempted from the B&O tax. So those things are treated as a wash. So what you're actually taxed on is much lower. I think a capital gains tax can work. I mean, it's not my bigot. It's fine. I would support it if that's the only thing that comes up, but it doesn't solve it. It has a minor effect on solving the complete regressivity of our tax system.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Courtney, do you have anything next?
I just had a thought in my head. I'm trying to recall it because I got distracted. Oh, you mentioned, you praised Texas. You mentioned wind power. I am in Tacoma, and Tacoma, like most of the Puget Sound, carved by glaciers moving north to south, or south to north rather, the retraction of them. So we, on the east-west travel, go over undulating hills. Mm-hmm. So while Washington and Tacoma are not known as, say, windy spots like Texas or North Dakota, we have a crazy amount of reliable wind, especially at the peaks of these. And I've lived on one, and I currently live kind of at the bottom of one. And even I, at this spot, could put a wind turbine on my property. I could put multiple wind turbines on my property, especially since they don't have to be the big white ones. They can be small spiral ones. Mm-hmm. And I feel like they might be a greener, I recognize the negative environmental impact of our solar panel production. Mm-hmm. And so it's like shades of green in the environmental community. And I'm always looking to further green, brighten the green, deepen the green. And I think wind is under promoted here because we aren't known as a wind machine city or state. But I think we have a lot of wind potential. Anything? Yeah,
I mean, if you look at Eastern Washington, I mean, there are Eastern Oregon there, I mean, especially around the gorge, I mean, there's a lot of new wind plants that have been built, wind farms that have been built. I mean, I think that's a promising idea. I mean, similarly, there is promises around offshore wind production. I mean, when we think about, I mean, there are we have to recognize that there are environmental costs and damages with any kind of energy production. And ultimately it is with wind, I mean, it does take a lot of space, usually to sort of build the turbines and also to build the infrastructure to get the power from the turbine to the transmission station. We also, and then that would be especially exacerbated if we tried to build offshore. So I mean, we have to think about all of these things when we're thinking about energy production, and so.
And I'm in a sweet spot. I'm in Tacoma. We already have public utilities. Yeah. So I feel like just plugging a wind turbine into my house and pumping the electricity back to the grid is
a little bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah, for an urban resident. Mm-hmm. So, and especially with public utilities already. there, I feel like we might be a hot spot for expanding that idea. And thank you.
All right. So we're getting close to an hour now. We're about an hour. So just some quick things that I saw here on the form that I wanted to hit on. So police reform. Here in Washington, we've passed 4 out of the 10 campaign zero proposals, which comes from the Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
People are always saying, what do you want? Well, they came out with and said, this is what we want. Are you open to helping look at passing all 10?
Yeah, I'll definitely work with individuals to consider and understand better all 10 of those proposals.
Excellent. And then when it comes to ICE and the detention centers, can you kind of just let us know what you think about all of that and thoughts
Well,
about?
I mean, what is happening now in our administration is completely against our values as Americans. And we need to make sure that people who are fleeing prosecution, fleeing persecution, fleeing domestic violence are able to come here safely and have the opportunity to plead their case. And we cannot and should not separate people. We should not treat these individuals similar to being akin to being a criminal when all they are. They're not. It's unfortunate. It's hugely a problem that someone comes to America fleeing domestic violence, fleeing any kind of violence, and then they're suddenly ripped apart from their child. I mean, I'm a father, and having my son ripped away from me would be the biggest pain ever in my life. I don't know how I could continue to move forward if that happened to me. And so these individuals who have come here seeking a better life, seeking safety, and to have their family ripped apart it's disgusting. It's against all our values, it's against all our principles that we share and we espouse as being American.
Yeah, right. So thank you for that. You're right. Disgusting is the right word for it. And then finally, guns, just real quick. So I liked your answer. So what do you see as a common sense gun control?
Well, I think that we need to make sure that we keep people who are, I think raising the minimum age to purchase a firearm to 21, I think is a common sense idea. I think that thinking about how we store and regulate guns are good ideas. I think we need to also make sure when we are dealing with especially storage, we think about the individuals with disabilities who may not. One of my friends is in a wheelchair. He lives by himself and has difficulty sort of navigating locks and things with his hands. So we need to make sure we work with, all stakeholders to sort of understand how moving forward on storage issues. But I think broadly we need to keep, the whole idea is we need to keep guns away from people and away from children.
Excellent. Thank you. Brian, any questions out there in the audience anywhere before we look at? No, nothing? All right. Excellent. So right now I'm going to let you just go ahead and state your name, again, the office that you're running for, a little blurb about what you want to make sure people remember about you, where they can find you, and how they can help.
I'm Chris Roberts, running for state representative in the 32nd Legislative District. My website is votechrisroberts.com, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you very much. I'm going to end the live stream right now, but you can hold on just a second. Thank you, everybody, for watching.